Thank you, Marco. Thank you very much. Thank you. Hello, everybody. Thank you very much.
I have to tell you a secret.
Yeah.
When we announce speakers, we sometimes get from our NOAH friends like little messages. Hey, well done on that. And when we announced you, we even got people in restaurants ask me, how did you manage to...
Come on,
really?
Come on.
It was the really big thing for us, and very, very thankful to have you here. But there's a mission we have to accomplish, so we should not get too distracted about making each other compliments. We'd like to know how you plan to change the world.
Well, thank you, Marco.
Thank you.
Thank you. It's great to be here. And Marco, congratulations on NOAH. You and Justice Lumpe have done such a wonderful job, and I'm so happy to be here at NOAH and to be in Berlin yet again. I've been able to spend a lot of time here in the last few years. Berlin is really hot. It's a hot spot for digital, for entrepreneurs, for the sustainability revolution, and that's part of what I want to talk about here. I come here as co-founder and chairman of Generation Investment Management, and I'm here with several of my colleagues, Nikki Rosinski and Alois Flatt, David Mood, Anthony Wolf. Some of the companies that we have invested in, we're very proud of. We work very closely with the companies we get involved in. Asana is the fastest growing work app that people can use to work together very efficiently, and Chris Farinacci, I think, is going to speak to you. DocuSign, which everybody, I think, knows about, part of the sustainability dematerialization revolution, Ron Herson. Optoro, Toby Moore is here. Also, Optoro is the leading re-commerce company. It's part of the digital revolution. When people buy online, one side effect is that the number of returns goes up, so that's a great business opportunity to handle those returns and the re-commerce opportunities very efficiently. These are examples, and there are so many, and so many of you are part of this revolution. Here's what I see happening in the world today. Of course, excuse me, of course, there are many troubling signs and causes for worry: the rise in inequality, the failure of many political systems. I'm embarrassed that my own country's political system is in disarray right now. Don't get me started on that. I don't intend to get into the Trump cul-de-sac. We might never get out. And of course, the businesses here in the main are rising and doing well, but our current global economic system in some ways doesn't seem fit for purpose. We have old, outdated metrics that don't measure the full spectrum of value. We have people being left behind. And of course, we have the climate crisis, and you'd be surprised if I didn't spend a little time talking about the climate crisis. It's the most serious challenge our civilization has ever faced. Today, we will put another 110 million tons of man-made heat-trapping global warming pollution into the thin shell of atmosphere surrounding our planet, using the sky as an open sewer free of charge. The cumulative amount of the man-made global warming pollution now traps as much extra heat energy in the Earth system as would be released by 400,000 Hiroshima-class atomic bombs exploding every day. And it's disrupting the climate balance that has been favorable for the flourishing of human civilization, disrupting ocean currents, wind currents, increasing the amount of water vapor in the atmosphere, and disrupting the water cycle, the hydrological cycle, 5% more humidity in the global atmosphere just in the last 30 years. And so we get these enormous downpours. Germany has experienced many of them in the last few years, some of them just in the last month. And that leads to these outsized flood events and mudslides. And the same extra heat pulls the moisture out of the soil and creates longer lasting, deeper droughts. Right now, one is underway in Brazil. It's already cost $4 billion to their economy. In my country, in the Southwest, we have a worse drought in part of the Southwest now than occurred during the Dust Bowl years of the 1930s. The fires are raging, and every night on the television news is like a nature hike through the book of Revelation. Last year we had Hurricane Harvey that dumped 1.5 meters of rain on Houston, Texas, the fourth once-in-a-thousand-year event in the last 6 years there. We're seeing, well, we had 3 big hurricanes in the U.S. Last year. Hurricane Irma, Hurricane Maria devastated Puerto Rico. It's a shame and a disgrace that my fellow Americans in Puerto Rico were left largely to their own devices. $320 billion in losses. The ice on Greenland and Antarctica is melting much more rapidly and raising sea levels. Now I saw fish from the ocean swimming in the streets of Miami on a sunny day. No rain for a long time. It's just the higher high tides now regularly flood many of the low-lying cities. And we are a coastal species in the main. We're seeing in Guangzhou and other parts of South Asia a real dire economic threat. Bangladesh, India's just completed the biggest steel fence in the world on its southern border with Bangladesh because the refugees from the southern parts of Bangladesh are crowding northward. Of course, the drought in Syria, before the civil war started, the worst drought in at least 900 years since records have been kept, devastated Syria. 60% of the farms were destroyed, 80% of the livestock were killed, and the WikiLeaks released conversations among the Syrian ministers saying, we can't handle this, all hell is going to break loose. And the multi-sided civil war there opened the gates of hell, and there were other factors, Assad and sectarian proxy wars and all of that, but large sectors of the Middle East and North Africa are in danger of becoming literally uninhabitable. And the political disruptions that come to challenge the stability of governance have been felt here in Europe as well. Even this wave of populist authoritarianism is partly fed by that. Even Brexit in the UK, one of the 2 most effective billboards there in the Brexit campaign showed an endless line of refugees from the Middle East and North Africa with the slogan, the EU has failed us. In my country, immigrants have been used demagogically to create additional support for this authoritarian wave. And 50% of all the living species with which we share this planet are in danger of extinction in this century, on our watch. The average land species, animals and plants, are moving on average 4.5 meters per day toward the poles. So this is an existential threat to our civilization that is without precedent. The only thing that approaches it is the receding threat of nuclear war. And it's difficult to solve because we still rely on fossil fuels for 80% of the energy the world uses. So we really do have to change, but there is a lot of good news, and you are part of the good news. We can solve this crisis. Humanity is now in the early stages of a sustainability revolution that has the magnitude of the Industrial Revolution, but the speed of the digital revolution. And it's driven by many of the new technologies with which you are familiar, the Internet of Things, machine learning, artificial intelligence, a shared determination, especially on the part of the generation that dominates this audience to get on with the solutions to this crisis and create a better, hopeful, healthier, more prosperous world. So I want you to know that my purpose here is not only to inform you and hopefully inform you in a way that's interesting to you. I'm here to recruit you. I want you to be a part of this sustainability revolution. Many of you already are. And we are seeing with the continued accelerated digital revolution, the dematerialization of parts of our economy in a very efficient and productive way. Many of you are finding ways to eliminate completely unnecessary waste. Those of you who are CEOs already know that when you go out to recruit the best and brightest young women and men, you're finding that they want to earn a good income, but they also want to work for firms that share their values and give them the opportunity to say to their friends and their families, yes, I'm doing well, but I'm also helping to make the world a better place. That is the shared mission that we all must be a part of now. And we're making progress. Last year, if you look at the 3 largest emitters of global warming pollution, China, the United States, the EU, and India, all of them, when you look at their creation of new electricity generating capacity, well over half of their new generating capacity last year came from renewables. India did a complete 180 U-turn after the Paris conference. China is under pressure to deal with air pollution, also water and soil pollution, and they want their skies to become blue again. They've just introduced a cap-and-trade system. And we're seeing momentum build in this sustainability revolution and momentum build towards solutions for the climate crisis. This will also help to deal with the threat of economic inequality in incomes and net worths. In my country, solar jobs are now growing 9 times faster than other jobs in the economy. Fastest growing job category. Second fastest growing job category is wind turbine technician. We see the opportunity with LEDs and better windows, more insulation, and the opportunity to retrofit buildings. You had a presentation earlier on building and architecture. Inefficient buildings contribute about 25% of the global warming pollution. The jobs to fix that problem can't be outsourced. They're found in every single community. Now, our political systems, as I mentioned earlier, are not rising to this challenge as quickly as they should, but young entrepreneurs are a central part of the solution. I like to think at Generation Investment that those investors who are focused on sustainable investing are a big part of the solution as well. You know, there is a new model to invest, not with a checklist of things that you don't like, but really to fully integrate ESG factors into every part of the investing process. Just to use a quick analogy, you know, if you look at the electromagnetic spectrum from the long radio waves to the short gamma rays and microwaves and everything in between, the portion we can see with our eyes in visible light is 0.1%. And so we naturally assume that's all we need to focus on. I went for 8 years when I worked in the White House, getting a full report every morning from the intelligence community, which, as you may have read, collects from the entire spectrum. The picture was much more complete and much more accurate. Here's the analogy. Many businesses now focus on a very narrow slice of the value spectrum. What is in the quarterly reports? What comes in the number streams on the Bloomberg screens? But what about the behavior of companies where the communities they're located is concerned? How do they treat their employees? What about their supply chains and distant communities and employees? What about the ethics in the C-suites? What is the culture of the company? These factors round out the fuller value spectrum, and actually over time, the success or failure of companies is far more often determined by these factors that are not easily equipped with a price tag. You've heard the old cliche that if the only tool you have is a hammer, every problem begins to look like a nail. Well, in the same way, if the only tool we use to measure value is a price tag, those values that don't come equipped with a price tag can begin to seem as if they have no value. Well, they do have value. And increasingly, the best firms are equipping themselves to measure, recognize, and take advantage of the values that are not so easily monetized, but actually will determine whether they are successful or not. We're seeing now in this sustainability revolution an enormous amount of innovation and creativity. Let me give you one quick example. Well, first of all, I'm on the board of Apple. I'm very proud that Apple is among the 130 global firms that has committed to shift to 100% renewable energy. And 2 months ago, Apple just achieved that. Google has the largest server farms in the world. And they tasked their AI company, DeepMind, based in London, to apply AI to the management of the server farms. And without any change in hardware, just with the application of AI, they reduced energy use 56% by managing the electrons much better and more accurately. Now, I should add that Google had collected vast troves of highly structured data, which represents a use case where AI really can be very effective. But there are thousands of use cases where the application of intelligence can make a huge amount of difference. We're seeing executive teams gain the ability to manage electrons and atoms and molecules with the same precision that the IT companies have demonstrated in the management of digits of information. And this is very exciting to me. We're seeing cost reduction curves for renewable energy, for batteries, for electric vehicles, for all manner of new efficiency improvements, many of them being demonstrated by firms represented in this audience, that are really, truly changing the world in a dramatic way. So this is a mission. Much depends on our success in accomplishing this mission. We need to continue to drive changes in the investing marketplace, in the business sector as a whole. And I want to compliment those of you who are already part of this great mission. I remember when I was quite young hearing former President John F. Kennedy in my country challenge the U.S. to put a person on the moon and bring him back safely in 10 years. And I remember how my generation back then felt so excited, even though many of the adults in that era said that's a waste of money, it's an unwise commitment, it probably can't be done. But 8 years and 2 months later, Neil Armstrong set foot on the moon. And in the moment he did so, in Houston, Texas, at NASA's Mission Control, a great cheer went up. And the average age of the systems engineers at Mission Control in that moment was 26 years old, which means, among other things, that they had heard that challenge when they were 18, and they decided to become a part of the great mission that Apollo program represented. Well, something like that is happening today. The naysayers have been skeptical that we can actually solve the climate crisis. But we can. We're already demonstrating the ability to do it. We have to stop subsidizing dirty fossil fuels. The world still subsidizes fossil fuels at a rate 38 times larger than the meager encouragements for renewables. But already, even with that disadvantage, the cheapest forms of electricity measured by how much it costs to generate it, leaving aside the intricacies of electricity markets, the cheapest are solar and wind. And the cost continues to come down. Many believe that by the end of this calendar year, we're going to see 1 cent per kilowatt hour electricity from solar. This is exciting to me. But we've got to build the momentum. The problem is still outpacing us. From when I first started working on the climate crisis 40 years ago, the essence of the challenge has been that the maximum that has been politically feasible at any given time has still fallen well short of the minimum that satisfies the laws of physics and actually solves the problem. But the gap is closing. We're gaining on this, and soon we will overtake it. But in order to succeed, we need you. And I'm trying to be as plain-spoken and sincere as I possibly can be. You will, if you are not already in this way of thinking, trust me, it won't be many years until you are. We are seeing this unfold in ways that are obviously growing worse, but the solutions are exciting and will be good for us in so many ways. So I wish all of you well. There are really only 3 questions left about the climate crisis. Must we change? Yes, I've given some of the evidence. There's much more besides. Tropical diseases are spreading, and I won't go through the depressing list, but yes, we must change. The second question is, can we change? I've given you some of the evidence for all of the advances that clearly demonstrate that we can change. The third is, will we change? Well, the best evidence that we will probably came from the Paris Agreement 3 Decembers ago, when every nation in the world, except Syria and Nicaragua, agreed to go to a complete net zero in global warming emissions by mid-century. Syria and Nicaragua have now joined the rest of the world. Now I know what you're thinking. Trump made a speech last year, just a year ago, 1 year and 1 week ago, in which he said he wants the U.S. to pull out of the Paris Agreement. I was worried that other nations might use that as an excuse to pull out themselves. But quite to the contrary, the day after his speech, every other nation said, no, we're good. We're going to meet this agreement. And some of them doubled down and said, we're going to do even more. And in my country, many of our largest states, California, New York, Washington, a dozen other states, and hundreds of cities said, we're still in it. And partly as a result of that and the commitment of big companies and small companies and medium-sized companies, the U.S. is on track to exceed the Paris Agreement commitments in spite of Trump. And here's another point some people are not aware of. The agreement was drafted in a way that under international law and U.S. law, the first day on which the U.S. could actually withdraw happens to be the first day after the next presidential election. And if there is a new president, excuse me for a moment, then a new president could simply give 30 days notice, and we would be right back in the Paris Agreement. So we have to change, and partly because of what so many of you are doing, we can change. We clearly have that ability, and I'm convinced that we will change. But to those of you, and maybe there are only a few, I don't know, but to those of you who are not yet part of this grand mission to secure the future of our civilization, I want you to be a part of it. The business opportunities are fantastic. The sustainability revolution is the single largest business and investing opportunity in the entire history of the world. Some of you already know that. You're already taking advantage of it. So if governments are slow off the mark, If the political culture is too often paralyzed, young entrepreneurs, SMEs, business leaders, executive teams can pick up the ball and carry it across to the goal that we need to reach. For those who believe that we don't have sufficient will to change, I'd simply close by reminding you that the will to change is itself a renewable resource. Thank you very much. Did you want to do any Q&A or not? Okay.
You want to, or?
It's up to you. You want to?
We want to have you all night.
It's up to you. It's up to you. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Maybe one or two questions?
Okay, sure.
I mean,
thank you. Thank you.
I think you recruited a large group of helpers here, huh?
I hope so.
So one quick question.
Yeah.
You want to recruit us. What exactly shall we do beyond garbage separation? I mean, what can we do in our daily life to fulfill the cause?
Introduce astonishingly new levels of efficiency into every part of the economy. It's profitable, people want it, we have the tools to do it. Just since I've been here, I've met with a number of businesses that have very exciting business plans, and most all of them are based on some version of this basic algorithm. Apply innovation, creativity, intelligence, and in some cases machine learning and AI to the identification and elimination of completely unnecessary waste. And by the way, if you look for the CO2 emissions, it gives you the ability to almost use a pair of magic glasses to see in the invisible, odorless, tasteless CO2 a trail of economic inefficiency and waste that you would find it very difficult to identify otherwise. Many companies are now applying an internal price on carbon in order to discipline everyone in their business to be alert to these opportunities.
Democracy has been a concept we love as humans because it's consensus and it seems fair. Now, how come that in today's world, where we find marriage candidates through the mobile phone, we are not voting through the mobile phone? In countries like Kenya, which democracy is actually dangerous to vote, I think there were 250 people killed. I mean, isn't that just a sad testimony of where our society come, that we don't use technology to get the job, as you said, done in an efficient way? Why are we not having mobile voting? The technology is there. There's a company tomorrow on stage here called SkyTel from Spain. They do it for the out-of-country voters, the ones who are abroad.
Yeah.
But I've also met with Mr. Ross from the Human Rights Watch, and we discussed the same. Why do we have so much red tape, so much bureaucracy, that something so obvious, like clicking on the phone and giving somebody the election and not risking my life going to the polls in Kenya, for example?
Well, it's a great question, and I'll give you two answers. One is a small but important concern, and that is security. And there are many people who are not yet ready to put their trust in something so sacred as a democratic voting process. Perhaps that can be solved. But here is my second answer, which I think is more important. Democracy, representative democracy as a system for collective decision-making, I think it's kind of partly in our genes. I think it's in our bones, but making it work is sometimes challenging. Here in Germany, 500 years ago, the invention of the printing press completely revolutionized the archaic fabric of the old world, democratized knowledge that had been reserved for elites, created an information ecosystem with very low entry barriers for individuals, and in addition to gaining access to the knowledge of the the wisdom of the ages and the new publications that sprung up to serve this sudden demand for knowledge, and literacy spread from Northern Europe south, and the same process happened in other parts of the world. That led to the emergence of a virtual public square in which the same kind of collective decision-making that had taken place in ancient Athens was suddenly feasible for something as large as a nation state. But the characteristics of that information ecosystem, low entry barriers, a two-way, literally read-write flow of information, and a mechanism by which the ideas that struck the more of the literate as valuable would rise to the surface the way Google searches used to operate. That system really led to the modern form of representative democracy. That information ecosystem has been disrupted radically, starting with broadcasting, radio, and then particularly television. And now the digital and social media, which I had seen as bringing hope for the reestablishment of this, but it has not yet worked out that way. Our conversation of democracy has been hacked. Long before the Russians hacked it, big money hacked it. And the effort to dominate this information ecosystem in ways that do not adequately inform voters about the true circumstances we face. You know, back 15 years ago, when my country made the most serious mistake, strategic mistake in its history by invading Iraq, invading a country that didn't attack us, 80% of the American people genuinely believed at that moment that Saddam Hussein, the dictator in Iraq, was responsible for flying the planes into the Twin Towers in Manhattan. That's absolutely insane. But it is a sign that our information ecosystem has not yet been restored to good working order. And that is a tremendous challenge. In order to solve the climate crisis and the larger ecological crisis, we have to fix the democracy crisis. And I know that there are some firms that are really focused on that. But, well, today, for example, in my country, something like 80% of Republicans believe that this investigator, special counsel investigating Donald Trump, hasn't found any evidence of any crimes. Well, there have been 5 guilty pleas. There have been people who've already gone to prison, and it's all there. But again, it's an example of how the distortions in our conversation of democracy are setting up barriers between people and the truth. We have to fix that, and then we can go on to the potential for maybe having digital voting in the future if we can solve the security issue.
And it's very retro-looking, right? I mean, to be honest with you, okay, we should care who does something wrong, but there's a much bigger task at hand to get it right in the future. And I don't feel like the media is helping. The politicians are clearly a bit clueless in your country. They're very occupied.
Not all of them.
Not all of them.
Certainly, certainly.
Let's take a question from Eran. You just tell us when you catch a flight or something. Eran, can we have a mic, by the way? Eran is...
Here we go.
Thank you.
Very simple and short, especially after your amazing pitch. Why don't you run for presidency again?
Well, I appreciate the suggestion. I'm a recovering politician, and the longer I go without a relapse, the less likely one becomes.
You're still young.
Thank you.
In the same way, this question, you have been VP, you have been making movies, movie documentary about your missions, you earned like the Nobel Peace Prize, now you are going into these new opportunities. Which one is the most impactful in your mission, and where did you get all this hope? Because today you're just here to evangelize everybody. This is really great what you're doing over the past years, but where did you get all this hope, and which position made the most impact for everybody?
Well, I'm under no illusion that there's any position in the world with as much potential for bringing beneficial changes than the position of President of the United States. Sometimes people say, oh, it was a blessing in disguise because now you can do these other things. I'm reminded that Winston Churchill, when he lost an election as a young man, one of his friends said, Winston, this is a blessing in disguise. He said, damn good disguise. But another answer to your question is that at Generation Investment Management, the work that I'm doing with the women and men at Generation is the most fulfilling work that I've had in my life, because I get to meet with CEOs and executive teams who are so dynamic and have such great ideas, and of course you have to sort the ones that are great from the others that are interesting, and then you have to look at the valuation. If everybody else has already recognized its value, then that's not good for our clients. But honestly, we have a sense of mission. Our mission at Generation is to prove the business case that fully integrating sustainability into every aspect of the investing process doesn't hurt returns. It actually improves returns. And I'm looking for wood to knock on, but after 14 years, we are now rising from the statistical noise with enough of a significant margin to say, so far, we are proving that business case. And by the way, the European Commission, just 2 weeks ago, our foundation, the Generation Foundation, has been working with them on this. They just served notice of a new rule they're going to put to Europe, requiring a change in the definition of fiduciary duty so that ESG factors must, by law, be included in the investment process. Now, it's hard to do, but this is a very positive sign. The largest sovereign wealth fund in the world, the Norwegian Sovereign Wealth Fund, whose revenues came, whose capital came 100% from oil and gas, just announced that they are 100% divesting from all oil and gas. We have a subprime carbon bubble, subprime carbon assets. 2/3 of the proven reserves cannot be burned, will not be burned. It's like the subprime mortgages where there was a mass delusion with all these millions of mortgages given to people who couldn't make down payments, couldn't make monthly payments, and then all of a sudden some guy on the spectrum was patient enough to dig through all the complexity and say, oh my God, these things are worthless. That's what caused the credit crisis and the fast following Great Recession. But now we have $22 trillion of subprime carbon assets that are never going to be put to their intended use and be burned. So what about all of this that's marked to market on the books of sovereigns and multinationals? At some point, that realization is going to take hold, and we have to prepare for that. And I'm so happy that the vast majority of those of you here are exploring and developing opportunities in the sustainability part of the economy that's going to be the future.
One more question.
Thanks so much for being here. As a fellow American, can I ask you, what gives you hope that American democracy and us getting back to solving the climate issues will survive Donald Trump?
Well, there's more resilience in American democracy than those of us who are Americans sometimes fear. We survived Richard Nixon, we survived a civil war, we survived the 1930s, and we will survive Donald Trump. Having said that, I do believe in all candor that the threat to American democracy is graver now than most people realize. The norms are being violated. Lies are a regular part of what we hear. I won't go through the list. I mean, every time a new outrage comes along, I have to download some existing outrage to make room for the new outrage. And just this week, his lawyer said that if he had shot and murdered the FBI director, James Comey, he couldn't be prosecuted. He's immune from well, no, I'm sorry. And the fact that the vast majority of people in both of our major political parties understand that that's utter nonsense with an evil core gives me hope. You give me hope. Your generation gives me hope. And the special elections that have been coming up give evidence that there are millions of people who are just waiting for a chance to give their verdict on all of this at the polls. It's not guaranteed, and it's a matter for concern. But I am confident, not only hopeful, but confident that we'll survive this.
One more question? Sometimes you have to go a step backwards to go forwards, I guess. Thank you so much.
Thank you all very much. Thank you. Danke. Thank you, Marco.
Very nice
Enjoyed
meeting
it.
you.